enabling us economic growth. And the economic growth is not like a little. The economic growth is like the hockey stick. And we get better by the day through this hockey stick. So if I ask you, do you prefer to live in 1850 or now? Probably you would say now. I hope you would say now. If I ask you, do you prefer to live in 1910 or now? Now. If I ask you 1940 or now? Now. 1980 or now? Now. 2000 or no, let's say 1990 or now? Then maybe 1990 because music was better, but otherwise now. 2000 or now? Now. 2017 or now? Now. Because we get better by the day. And this is the spirit and culture of innovation, of betterment, that the cities have also leveraged. Yeah, Alex?
If the answer is not too long, how do they calculate GDP beyond, say, 200 years in the past? I mean, it's hard enough as it is with inflation and so on.
This is all done without inflation, obviously corrected for inflation. This is basically linked to the equivalence then of what the purchasing power would have been. But I can also forward you the papers relevant to how they debase that. But it's basically well accepted that this is a kind of okay measure for it. So the Industrial Revolution, in fact, has caused all this great, miraculous, we get better by the day story. And this has been nothing else than a spirit of making things better. So if you believe the story that about cities, that in cities there is this certain spirit of like drive and like progress, then this is the equivalent in history. The Industrial Revolution has been caused by this. There are a couple of ways to explain the Industrial Revolution. The ones most economists agree with nowadays is that it has been caused by ideas. Namely the ideas that we want to make the world a better place. One of my friends does a PhD at King's and he looks at the diaries of the innovators. And these innovators communicated with each other, all of them. They said, okay, I saw your machine, you can tweak that even better, you can make that even better. And this is what happens in cities all the time. If you bring a cluster together, they help each other to make progress. And if you don't believe me, do you think, oh, you're a nice storyteller, Sven? This is just from a July 2019, so it's even in the future, it's like in the future. This is the latest episode, this is the latest edition of the Journal of Urban Economics. And what it looks at is how writers, like the most unproductive of all forces, the writers have behaved once they have been exposed to urbanization. So what the author here says is, I find the average author experiences productivity gains of 11.94% per annum when residing in London, the only major literary cluster. The gain not associated with living somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. So just by moving to the city, writers, the least of all productive people, 12% growth. So if you would make this, and there are many studies, how it is impacted once you take a certain industry or a certain part of endeavor into the city, you benefit from the spirit effect, from the clustering effect, from all the effects that we have just talked about. And that makes us so incredibly more productive. So all of these different aspects of the centripetal story bring us closer together. They justify cities. Because otherwise, we have to really guess what are the reasons why people come together in cities. But here we have economic theory explaining us why we come together in cities. It's because we want to do trade, and with increasing globalization, it's just a good idea to cluster around ports. We reduce transaction costs by coming closer to each other. We have economies of scale where we have to provide services to people, and it becomes less costly at the margin. We have cluster effects, diversity and economic opportunity. We learn from each other. This is basically very similar. This causes innovation, because overall the spirit of innovation is what we are after. Not one innovation, not one tweak. We are after the spirit of betterment and progress. And that's at the heart of the city. That's why I think that if we want to have even a better and more progressive future, cities is the way to go, because it leverages especially the things that we are after today. We are today a lot about innovation and the culture of innovation. Okay, I know I already ran over time, but bear with me, I will just quickly go through the puzzle here. This was the nice story about cities so far. But bringing people together in one place initially doesn't sound like a good idea. Because if you bring people together, you're very easy to attack. In the past, of course, you know, people wanted to attack, like the Huns, they knew one city, or like whatever bandits, they attacked one city, and it was a very easy target for them. Okay? So why would you do that? Nowadays it's the same. You have one city, like Paris or New York, when you want to do a terror attack, like it's best to do it in a city, okay? You will have the most damage impact. It's kind of a risk assessment for yourself. Do you want to cluster, especially all your elites in one specific place, and when something bad happens, it could all be affected? It doesn't sound like a good idea at once. However, cities have nothing else like this. They have this clustering effect to bring the people together and make it thus more vulnerable. And this vulnerability is not only for outside attack, it's also contamination. This is a picture, I think, from Paris. At that time, it was London, I think. And you will have, of course, fisication in the public. You will have incredibly dirty environments at that time. And this has big risks for contamination. And this was the initial struggle of cities, why they didn't grow further, right? Because of public health reasons. The same holds true for transportation. I will skip this, it's a bit complex, but the car itself has already posed a big problem to cities. Because now, why would you have to live in a city? You can just commute to the city, you live somewhere nice in the suburban area, in the suburbs, and you have an enjoyable life, you have access to nature, and once you have to go to work, you use the car to commute to work, right? So the car is not a force that leads us to come together, but rather to spread out again, because now I can cover a lot of distance in rather short time. So that's a force against it, and with getting cars more safer and more pleasant, you can listen to your podcasts and whatsoever on the travels. It seems to be a force taking out of city life. Or preservation. So here we have Florence. In Florence, what do you see here? What strikes you in this picture?
Mixture of other buildings.
The church.
The church? The church? But what is with the church here? What makes this church so special? I mean, it's beautiful, yeah. But
The Brunelleschi.
yeah, it's architectural wise, yes, I agree. What is so special about the church here?
At the center.
Say?
I think it's the first university, house of the first university in Europe, and plus it shows the cultural heritage of this city.
Okay, yeah, that shows all the cultural heritage, yeah.
It's the physical hierarchy of the social cultures and the power dynamics.
Okay, yeah.
So it's from the medieval time when the church used to overrule.
Yes, because what you say, it's the tallest building, right? That you see here. It's above everything. And this is linked to what I said about skyscrapers and city regulations. Because you want to keep this look, this distinct look, you have housing regulation that prohibits you to build high. Because otherwise, of course, you wouldn't be able to see the church. It might ruin this very picturesque picture, you know, so you might not want to have that. But on the other side, if you are concerned with city life and how to bring density together, this incredibly limits your possibilities. Okay? There was a question, yeah?
Ça montre aussi le pouvoir que l'Église avait historiquement en Europe, car il administrait aussi la ville. Historiquement, c'était l'Église qui centralisait le pouvoir aussi.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you have this at the top. I mean, there's reasons why, of course, this has to be the tallest building, you know. And why there is still nowadays it's less about the reasons why we have still housing regulations, but the historical reasons or the preservation of this historical architectural sphere is the reason why we have it. And you see that it has like different manifestation. In Paris, for example, in the center of Paris you also have housing regulations. You don't have a lot of skyscrapers in central Paris. So what they did, I don't know who of you have been in Paris, this is the second Arc de Triomphe kind of, okay? They have the Arc de Triomphe, and there's like very beautiful houses, and no Parisian can afford to live there normally, you know, because it's very expensive. But what they created was a different center. So here's the original Arc de Triomphe, here's like flat buildings, and then you see in the background La Défense. And La Défense is the district where the businesses are. And there you don't have these housing regulations anymore. What you have is people can build the skyscrapers. So what they have, and this is by the way the second arc, the second arc here, so you see you basically have a straight line there. And here you have all the skyscrapers. So we outsourced all of this outside. So they are hybrid versions. It doesn't have to be like Florence, where you only have one center and the rest is kind of limited. It makes it also very expensive to live in Florence. Here you kind of had at least a little bit of solution for the businesses by creating some skyscrapers. Okay, and by the way, London and Paris and all of them, they suffer from incredible house prices. But they suffer because they limit housing through such regulation. Because if you cannot build high, you can only build to the outskirts, and that makes, of course, housing unattractive, very costly. Making an additional layer on top of a skyscraper is much more cost efficient than building suburbs and suburbs and suburbs in this direction of the horizontal, right? The next feature is communication. And by the way, why is this a problem to cities? Of course, if the preservation forces are very strong, you put a limit to city development. And that's what you see. Florence is not a mega city because there is no development allowed in that regard, right? I mean, when preservation comes into place with the demands for urban development or comes at stake with, at heads with it, then this is a real risk for urbanization. Communication is another one. A lot of people might say, why do we need cities? We now can communicate with each other at the tip of our fingertips. You know, like we have smartphones, we are now connected to our home countries. Why would I need to have the commute into the city, like go to an office space and then commute with people there, communicate with people there? I can do everything by Skype meetings, I can sit back home, I have my home office, and it's all nice. And that seems to be the puzzle of smart city. We are in favor of technology, especially information technology, but we're also in favor of urbanization. But now I tell you that communication is one of the forces that takes us away from cities. Can somebody explain how to solve this puzzle? Communication is easier. Why would we need more dense cities? We could just spread, right? Why do we still need it?
First of all, I think that it's just transitional period because maybe after some years this process will start. But even now, when I'm in our company in Synopsis, we're trying to do some meeting. It is much more comfortable to have all together in one physical place. It's maybe because we teach so, and maybe it can be changed after some years. But till now, if it is something important or general to discuss, all gathers in one place physically.
Question is, why do we do that? Are we irrational?
I would say tacit knowledge. You don't have tacit knowledge if you are like connected and they're not connected, and no one can watch what you do, what you don't do.
Yeah, tacit knowledge is a big part of the story.
Je pense. Je pense bien qu'il faut une densification pour réduire les distances. Parce que quand les villes s'étalent de manière horizontale, l'investissement est plus lourd pour le pouvoir public en termes d'infrastructure. Alors que sur un espace assez réduit, si on arrive à faire habiter une population assez élevée, on réduit surtout l'investissement. De plus, dans le concept de ville compacte, c'est une recommandation pour jouer un peu sur les questions de déplacement, pour éviter les longs déplacements aux populations qui peuvent, pour des centres d'intérêt assez précis, se retrouver à un endroit où ils sont plus proches de leur centre d'intérêt.
Exactly, but yet we still have to solve the puzzle whether communication technology. Now? Sorry. We still have to solve the puzzle how communication technology is interacting with us. Because even if we have all of this in place, maybe the most important thing that we nowadays have is communication for most jobs that we have. So they drive us away a little bit from urbanization. How do we deal with it, especially in the context when we think about smart cities? Anna, and then
I just wanted to comment that yes, technology helps cross distances and maybe it's all good work, but we still have a lot of physical needs, including things like the hospital that you have in your slide. You can solve maybe some medical things through communication, but you still need the physical aspect of it. Food delivery, human physical interaction. There still remains a lot of physical things that we rely on that technology so far cannot cover.
yeah. But however, we try to have now these kind of things on our wrist, and we have all kinds of, like, they track our heart rate, they track our steps, they track health benefits. Maybe we put a chip in here, and then we don't have to see our doctor anymore. If I have something that goes wrong with the, as I said, in the UK, then I have to call the NHS, and the NHS, before I can see a doctor, they ask me, how bad do you feel on a scale from 1 to 10? I'm like, how would I evaluate this? 10, I guess. Otherwise, I wouldn't call. So there might be, like in the future, where I just have a Skype meeting with my doctor and he has immediate access to all my relevant data. Is that maybe something that takes away from urbanization? There was a hand there. Yeah.
Je voulais dire que Je voulais dire que la technologie peut permettre d'informer plus vite. Par exemple, je donne un exemple juste au Sénégal. Parfois, les Facebook, les réseaux sociaux, merci. Les réseaux sociaux ont permis de faire passer des informations publiques, parfois des informations qui sont internes, par exemple. Et ça permet d'aller plus vite et que tout le monde puisse être au courant de ce qui se passe, même si les réseaux nationaux sont parfois interdits ces choses-là.
Yeah. There's an upside to all of this, of course, also too. Think of, for example, political movements in a city. It's also through social communication and then coordination on the spot. It's much easier to arrange a social protest in a city rather than somewhere else where you have to gather a lot of people from different. Coordination is just much more costly, right? But still, we haven't solved the problem why increasing internet or communication technology might be not a paradox with increasing urbanization. There's something called Jevons paradox, okay? And Jevons paradox is the idea that by making something more efficient, you will consume more of it, okay? So, classic case is the combustion engine made our use of certain resources more efficient, but overall, so we have something that is more efficient, and nevertheless we demanded more coal and things like this. So what we see nowadays with the knowledge economy is that cities have given us much more opportunity to express creativity and to express entrepreneurship, and therefore it is at a higher rate of benefit. And therefore we demand even more. It enables us to do this, it enables us to release the creative forces and the innovative forces in society, and so we don't have declining rates, but even a more explosive demand for these kind of endeavors. So what we will see is not a reduction in communication, but even more. When you bring people together in an office space, they call each other more than when you have people at their home offices and make them call. They call each other less. It's very weird. People in the same company, but at home offices, they call less than when you put them into one building together where they know each other and have access to each other. They call each other more often. Okay? There seems to be something about this tacit knowledge, this learning from each other, the spirit that you have once you bring people closer together. And I think this reward will play out with increasing urbanization. So these are a couple of the forces that operate against the city. One, of course, it makes it very vulnerable to outside attacks. The contamination risk. So if you follow the AI debate, they talk about existential risks. And they always warn to bring people at one specific place together, you know, put all eggs in one basket, which basically a city is to a certain degree. So this is a big risk here. Transportation, this is the car, as I said. Preservation, if we put a lot of effort on our heritage and don't allow a lot of building and development projects. And of course, communications. So what we as policymakers, or as people interested in the space, have to decide who wins in this debate for us, for which city, for which context. Where are the strongest, that the centripetal force is stronger, and where are the centrifugal forces stronger, and for what reason? Okay, yes, please.
I just want to add regarding the centrifugal force, because for my home state in Penang, we had a problem which caused this problem, the centrifugal force, where there was a Rent Control Act, and the people was actually there was a high density of people staying in the partner cities, and when the Rent Control Act was abolished, the owners can raise the price of rent, so forcing out the people to live outside of the cities. So now there is another problem. Since 2008, we obtained the UNESCO Heritage City, but there are buildings but no locals, right? So we have to reverse that. So I don't know. That what the problem was. It was because of the law, a repeal of the law that caused this problem. And now we have to find ways how to bring back the people to the city.
Yeah, I think it's a big struggle for many also cities with a lot of cultural heritage, that in the cities itself the locals cannot live, and then you don't have innovation because you have basically one force, namely tourism or something like this, right? So tourism is everything, you have everything in one basket, but then you don't have innovation there. But you need this diverse, it's too much to jump back, but you remember what I said here about diversity and opportunity. Diversity of economic opportunities, or diversity of any sorts of opportunities, is important. So yeah, that's a good example there.
I think centrifugal forces has been more important in recent years, mainly because of telecommunication and information technologies and digitalization. When we think of urbanization, we mainly think about density and still becoming more crowded. But now it started to change. I think we now start to talk about dispersed cities, because you don't have to go to the center to take care of your businesses. You can stay where you are and communicate or use technologies to do your business.
Exactly. So you have the cities in the cities, you know. So I think this is an interesting thing that we will also discuss. I also think with Vera on Thursday, how we do with neighborhoods. You know, there will be natural tendency where certain niche cultures, for example, diverge to a certain area. They vote with their feet in the city. And this is sometimes possible if you allow for different regulation within the city. So for example, different city council might take different initiatives. In London, you have very distinct neighborhoods. Not only by people who live there, but by people who move somewhere. There's a movement towards whatever Southeast London at the moment for various reasons. It's not only the reason that it's affordable, but it's also very business friendly in the sense that there are a lot of working spaces for young people to like have startup hubs and stuff like this. So they have the infrastructure. And this will be something in the future that we will see that will be much more explored. But of course, it comes with a framework. We have to allow city councils to make policies, for example, for a certain neighborhood. And I will talk more about when we talk about city planning, how to accommodate for neighborhood policies and how neighborhoods can come up with the needs by themselves. If you ever heard of Jane Jacobs, Jane Jacobs was also a famous architect, but also social theorist, and she also thought about how we should arrive at the architecture and structure of the city that we want to have. And if it comes from bottom up, there's a good case to be made. So, because I'm running out of time, a couple of big ideas. What are the causes of the triumph? The triumph is that we have allowed competition between cities. And even in a globalized world, even if your country is less open and you can move less amongst countries, you still have competition between cities in the same country. So cities is one of the most fundamental competition elements in a society. You can vote with your feet. The next one is connection. It makes us easier. We are more aware of what are our relevant partners with whom we can match. Cities has become much better at matching us with the relevant partners. And I don't mind Tinder here, but like somebody who has very similar interests and who is beneficial for your economic and lifestyle endeavors. And lastly, it has created so much human capital, but on the other side, it is also human capital which is demanded. So it caters to the right need. At the moment, most of our innovation is driven by human capital. Cities generate a lot of human capital, so it caters basically at the right time to the right need. And therefore, it's kind of reinforcing. So I think these three big ideas led to the triumph of the city, and I think it will be very clear that this might also be ongoing for a while. And therefore the city will be, and urbanization will be something that we will be observing in the future. We can discuss this tomorrow with Kamran Cesar when he talks about megatrends, but I think cities are one big trend still going on. And I didn't talk a single thing about technology and software. This is just about cities and the economics of it. Thank you very much. I know I went a bit over time and it's very complex. But we have now half an hour break before we go into another exercise. So let's do half an hour. After all these theories, and I know it's complex, these are different terminologies, and for some of you who don't come from an economics background, don't worry, this is just a start. We will repeat these concepts over time and clarify and apply them. This is just a little bit of the roadmap how our methodology works.